Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frédéric Anotier. I will be the moderator of this session, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you all this afternoon on behalf of the Global Parliament of Mayors and the Human Rights City Network. Today, this is in the context of the DeCiDE project. We are going to look at monitoring human rights and the EU Charter in the context of the EU Charter of the Fundamental Rights. It's going to be an interactive session in the context of the DeCiDE project that jointly the Global Parliament of Mayors, the Human Rights City are implementing in view of implementing, monitoring and implementing human rights at local level, bringing cities and civil society together to co-develop tools for monitoring human rights. In this context, our goal is to support democratic, inclusive, and human rights-based approach in the context of urban governance. And of course, the purpose today is to ground it in the context of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. I'm delighted today to have together with us key important speaker. First of all, Rainer, who is the Executive Director of the Global Parliament of Mayors. Julia Johnson, who is an advisor and specialized in monitoring and communication at the Human Rights City level. The councillor from the city of Padova, Francesca Benciolini. Carmen Puyenbroek from the city of Ghent, Fanny Birborca-Contro from the district of Józsefváros in Budapest, Farkas Attila, program manager at Mira Intercultural Community, and Peter Rosens, youth worker and policy maker at Leo in Belgium. So together we are going to look forward to learn from their local expertise, understand their experience, how do they monitor human rights, and how this monitoring can be shaped based on their practice and their experience. In this context, I will give first the floor to Rainer for the welcoming remark and opening this important webinar this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frederick. Wonderful you're all here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm greeting you from overheated Germany, southwestern Germany. Nevertheless, I thank you for joining us for this important conversation. Let me take the time and a few words more maybe to set the scene and to line out and to frame our work, and so that we can work together on the same ground, so that we have an idea why we're doing this, what Frederick initiated, and we are happy to be a partner with the Human Rights Cities Network. We're delighted to welcome you to this timely webinar on local human rights, monitoring, and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, as Frederick already has told you. That's why cities have a vital role to play, not only in delivering public services, what you would normally say cities are for, but also in defending human dignity, inclusion, and democratic participation. I think we all make the same experience in our cities, that there's a need to talk about these things, because human rights are often understood and legislated at the national or international level, as we all know. Yet it is in cities that these rights are most directly experienced and either fulfilled or denied. Whether it's the right to housing, to education, to non-discrimination, or to democratic participation. These are all exercised, protected, and sometimes challenged in our neighborhoods, on our streets, and in the everyday interactions between people and local institutions. And as we all know, because we hear that in every webinar, in every lecture, in every meeting we're having, more and more people living in cities, that's the place where we have to look at all these things. And that's why local governments are not just service providers, they are also human rights actors. Cities are on the front line of the daily lived experience of human rights. It's at the local level where people access housing, education, healthcare, public space, and justice, or where they experience exclusion and inequality, if we are honest. This makes local governments essential actors in defending and advancing human rights in a meaningful, practical way. The EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, which is sometimes less known than the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, but the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights sets out the core rights that should be guaranteed to everyone in the European Union. dignity, freedom, equality, solidarity, citizens' rights, and justice. It brings together in a single clear document a comprehensive set of civil, political, economic, and social rights that must be respected by EU institutions and member states when implementing EU law. We should keep that in our mind. But for the Charter to have real impact, it must not remain solely in legal text or policy documents. It must guide decisions and inspire action at all levels, especially in cities. Local authorities are uniquely placed to make the values of the Charter visible and intangible through their policies, budgets, service delivery, and community engagement. When municipalities align their work with the Charter's principles, they help ensure that rights are not only promised but practiced. This is the spirit of the DeCiDE project that, again, thanks to Frederick, was initiated by the Human Rights City Network, and we are, with the Global Parliament of Mayors, are part of. And the title is Boost Democratic Participation in Cities to Recharge Democracy in Europe. And this recharge something means there's a need to recharge something, right? So we know from all democracy reports that democracy is declining in the world, and only 1/3 of the population is living in full democracies. And that's not only outside Europe. And this DeCiDE project, launched by the Global Parliament of Mayors and the Human Rights Cities Network, as I already said, with the support from the European Union, brings together diverse European cities of different size and form different countries to co-develop a rights-based participatory monitoring system that helps local authorities and civil societies track how well fundamental rights are being realized on the ground. So when we're talking about implementing the human rights or ensuring human rights, we should know where we stand, right? And that's why we thought it's important to develop a monitoring system so that we have an idea where we have to work on and on what exactly we have to work on. So I thank you to all the city and civil society organizations representatives joining us today for this important discussion. Through this collaborative process, we think cities are building concrete tools co-designed with communities to assess and strengthen their commitments to equality, participation, and non-discrimination. The aim is not only to generate data, but to transform it into shared knowledge, peer learning, and policy change. Through the DeCiDE initiative, we are working with cities to do just that, to monitor how these rights are realized or at risk at the local level, and to develop tools and strategies that strengthen democratic, inclusive, and rights-based urban governance. Today's discussion, I'm sure, will offer us a glimpse into that process, highlighting the experiences of cities and civil society organizations actively shaping this work. It's also an opportunity to reflect on how the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, often perceived as abstract, can be localized and activated in powerful, practical ways. I thank you very much that you're joining today, that you're taking the time for this very important topic. And I hand over to my dear friend and colleague, Frederick, who, I say it again, is the initiator of this project. Thank you, Frederick, for moderating the session. And thank you all for being here. And let's have a productive session. Thank you. You're muted, Frederick.
Thank you, Rainer, for highlighting the importance of this project, but also the importance of monitoring human rights in the context of DeCiDE, but much wider than that, also in the context of an overall global declining democracy, and focusing more on the importance why cities are important. Before we move into the panel discussion, I would like to take a moment to pass the floor to Julia Johnson from the Human Rights City Network. Julia also is one of our colleagues who has been working a lot on developing the strategy and the methodology. So Julia is going to talk about how the focus area of the human rights monitoring was selected for the DeCiDE project, and she will lead us through that using the Charter of the Fundamental Right as a framework, and highlighting in that context how the three main priorities that will be looked at in the context of the DeCiDE project has been selected. Julia, the floor is yours. Julia, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi is unstable, but I will do my best. So good afternoon, everyone. As Frederic mentioned, I'm Julia Johnson, and I am the Monitoring and Communications Assistant at the Human Rights Cities Network. Firstly, thank you to Frederic for moderating this webinar and to Rainer for the introduction, as well as, of course, the rest of the panelists and the entities for being here this afternoon. So in February, representatives from participating cities chose 3 human rights topics that they will each monitor using a standardized system that is being co-created as part of the DeCiDE project. So from this, they will also be developing indicators that they will use to monitor these topics as a part of the remainder of the project, as well as hopefully beyond. And this will be done during a week-long training in Treviso at the start of October. But before I start talking about the process itself, I really want to emphasize the importance of taking such a participatory approach, because this approach is really crucial. Because at the end of the day, it is the cities that will be monitoring these areas. So it's so important that they are really at the heart of the decision-making process, because this is topics that they will monitor. So it's for them, made by them. And this is kind of a philosophy that we use a lot at Human Rights Cities Network, making sure that is bottom up rather than top down approach. And it is really something that we're using throughout the DeCiDE project as well. So it's very important for us. Because overall, our goal is to empower the cities, ensuring that they have the tools and knowledge to continue monitoring these issues well beyond the pilot phase of this project. So this isn't something that at the end of the 2 years it will end. We really want to make sure that this is institutional knowledge that will be carried on and can be used to monitor other rights. Then in terms of the process itself, as GPM and Human Rights Cities Network, we gave the cities a short list of 10 topics from which to choose from. And this was mainly done for efficiency and time reasons, because there are so many human rights that one can monitor, and it is just not feasible to do so in this project. But obviously, we wanted the ultimate decision to be them, so we didn't want to impose what they should monitor. So that's why it was just a list of 10 that they could choose from. And we really based our choice on the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, mainly because of the breadth of rights covered there. Not a lot of people are aware of the EU Charter. People tend to be more aware of the European Convention on Human Rights, but the reality is that the Charter covers a lot more rights and a lot more contemporary rights, such as digital rights. So that was really our basis. And from then, we looked at the rights and we realized that some of the rights could also be joined together, grouped together to become a kind of human rights topic. So, for example, we grouped freedom of expression and information with freedom of thought, conscience, and religion into one. This because it would then allow also the cities to then, when they develop an indicators, to choose specifically within that what they'd like to monitor, and it's broad enough for that. So through this process, it was really important to keep in mind the relevance to cities, the feasibility to monitor these at a local level, because as some of you may be aware, the EU Charter also has rights that are more EU level or national level competencies that would be difficult to monitor at the local level. And really also to make sure that it was topics that would fall under the profiles of the different cities. So it can be hard with multiple cities to come up with a consensus. So we tried to make the list broad enough that there was something for everyone, basically. So at the end of this process, we created a short list of the following rights, which I'll just read out quickly. So digital rights, rights of the child, access to justice, access to the labor market and workers' rights, civic rights to democratic participation and the right to vote, a right to non-discrimination, rights to access social and cultural services, freedom of thought, consciousness, religion, expression, and information, right to education, culture, and right to asylum and hospitality. So these topics were presented to the city representatives during an online workshop, which was held on the 27th of February. Representatives from Padova, Ghent, Braga, Józsefváros, and Krakow came together to decide which 3 topics to monitor. So firstly, the city representatives had time to themselves to think about it, and then they're split into two groups to discuss and then came back together. So the cities refined the list, taking into account what was practically feasible to monitor at the local level, especially since some rights do fall more under the national level of monitoring, like I said, rather than local oversight. For example, as interesting as freedom of expression was, it was considered a bit too complex to monitor at the local level. And given that this is a pilot project, so as well as monitoring, we're helping to create the system. So then through these discussions, the right to access social and cultural services was identified as one of the most relevant by all participants, because then the topic sparked a deeper conversation about how growing multiculturalism needs to be factored in to the provision of services. So this is why this right was chosen. And then from this, there was also discussion about the importance of civic rights, especially during the context of a global DeCiDE in democracy, which is part of this reason that this DeCiDE project exists. So it was discussed that this right is actually very important to monitor, especially at the moment. And then there's the right to non-discrimination. This right encompasses a lot of, it's quite broad, it encompasses various rights, which is why it was also chosen, because then again, at the developing the indicator stage, that's when you can narrow it down a bit more. So this led to kind of summing up the three areas that were chosen to monitor, which is the right to access social and cultural services, the right to non-discrimination, and civic rights to democratic participation and the right to vote. And I would just like to, as I finish up, highlight that the human rights are deeply interconnected. So while the scope of this project doesn't allow us to monitor, as I said, all possible human rights that exist, the three topics that were selected do encompass a broad range of rights, and that it allows the participants to gain the knowledge of how to monitor the rights in a standardized way, that they can then use that system to monitor the rights that they feel is most needed in their specific context. So this is why I earlier mentioned that DeCiDE is a pilot project, because we really hope that not only will these areas keep being monitored after the project, but also that other rights will be using the same system to monitor these rights, and that other cities will also join in this system. Back to you, Frédéric.
Thank you very much, Julia, for this very clear approach which has been applied to the DeCiDE project. And also, I would like also to thank you, Julia, not only for the work you've been doing together with the Global Parliament of Mayors, but also to underlying the importance of the bottom-up approach and the inclusive process of this pilot project, and showing that the priorities has been selected according to the competence of the cities in the light of the EU Charter, and to explain how this shortlisted was reduced to basically three main areas: non-discrimination, right to access to services, and the right, civic right and democratic participation, mainly the right to vote. This is very important because this frame the discussion that we will turn out now towards the panelists, and we are very happy to welcome 5 representatives from city representatives, but also civil society partner organization for municipalities who will be part of this pilot project. So before I give the floor to the panelists one by one, I would like to invite first of all, to thank the participants who are attending today, but also to recommend you to submit directly your question to the question and answer option at the bottom of your screen if you like to ask a question to the panelists. That will be taken into account after the presentation. And if I also, for each speaker who will take the floor following my introduction, to briefly introduce them. So we will start. And also I have to be a bit the keeper of the timing, so to remind to all the panelists that you will have more or less 5 minutes to present and to respond to the question which will be addressed directly to you. Once again, thank you to the panelists to be part of this. So I will start with Francesca Benciolini, who is a counselor from the city of Padova, with whom we have already been working and extensively looking at the possible criteria to determine indicators. So I would like to ask Francesca, in terms of civil and political rights, how is your city fostering democratic participation beyond voting? And other initiatives like participatory budgeting or local council in place that you would like to present? Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, and it's really a pleasure to be here with you all. I really think that being together is very much useful and important, especially in this moment where we have the idea that maybe being together is not really creating human rights and peace around the world. So thank you again. So about democratic participation in Padua, I would like to just to present three projects, among others. First of all, so Padua is a city of about 210,000 inhabitants, and out of them, more or less 35,000 are persons with no Italian citizenship. So one of the topics for us is to guarantee democracy and participation to all the people that cannot vote. So what we did several years ago, and in the last years we made some other efforts, was to find out a solution to give voice also to all the people that are not allowed to vote and cannot have a voice in our council. So at the moment, let's say we know that all the European citizens have the right to vote for the local council and for the mayor. So what we did is to give the possibility of a special committee that is elected, but all the communities that don't have a citizenship, Italian or European citizenship, this committee is elected by all these communities, and they are associated and they meet together on any kind of topics they think is important to discuss among them, being an institutional committee, so they have the right to discuss all the topics and to bring them to the different part of our government, to the mayor. And the president of this committee can sit in our council, so he can be heard, and he has the right to give voice to all the communities within our council. Second, we think that participation and democracy must go through a community-based approach, not just bottom-up, but really community-based. So giving the possibility to all the communities in all the neighborhoods to discuss all the kind of topics that belong to the town, to the cities, to the different topic we are dealing every day is very important. And so even if our law decided about 10 years ago to cancel all kind of committees for all the towns that are less than 200, 500,000 inhabitants, we decided to give voice through 10 committees that are spread in the different neighborhoods of the town. And these committees, once again, they are expression of the citizenship, the citizens of that neighborhoods. They are open to any other person that want to join them, and they have the right to discuss and to be in touch with the government and the mayor. Third, the participatory budget. So these commissions, committees of all the neighborhoods, they have the right to decide on a small budget of the municipality. So they are in some way led by some people, experts, to decide together in a participatory way how to spend that budget on their neighborhood, so that they can, on one side, have words on how to spend money on their neighborhoods. On the other side, they can understand how it works to deal with the budget of a municipality and be more able to understand how this works in a municipality. So I will stay with this.
Thank you very much, Francesca. It was very clear and a very good example, inspiring, I would even say, how through different kind of special committees, first you allow some person who fall out of the framework how to vote at the local council level, being represented by the president and giving them a voice, giving a voice to the community, but also through participatory approach, which is at the community level, I would say more community-based approach, through committee at neighborhood level, and associate together with a participatory budget who allow really the community to have a word to say and to decide on how to spend the money in a very participatory approach. Thank you, Francesca. This is very enlightening, and thank you for that. Now I would like to give the floor to Carmen, who is also Carmen Vijpuyenbroek. I hope I pronounce it well, from the city of, she's an advisor of the city of Ghent. We also have been working extensively already in the context of this project together with the city of Ghent. And Carmen, after a small introduction, if you want to add something about you, I would like to ask you how is your city, or the city of Ghent, is currently addressing the challenge related to the discrimination or the inclusion in the public service, which is also a very important aspect. And where would you like to share some example of progress or obstacle you encounter in the context at the level of the city of Ghent? Thank you. Carmen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frédéric. So I work for the city of Ghent, and I'm a team coach of Ghent Solidarity, in which we have advisory boards on human rights, for example. The city of Ghent has been investing in strong anti-discrimination and anti-racism policies for years. We are one of the pioneers of the ECAR coalition, which is the European Coalition of Cities Against Racism, in which we make 6-year-old plans with concrete actions that we want to actively combat structural racism and discrimination. The emphasis in Ghent is on work, education, housing, which is increasingly a problem in our city, but also discrimination in nightlife and safety in public space. I will give a couple of concrete examples of actions in such an ECAR plan. For example, is we offer bystander training to colleagues of the city of Ghent, but also to the citizens of Ghent, so they learn how to respond appropriately if they are victims or they witness unwanted behavior. It's very popular. In this year, we honored the 10,000 participants of the training. So, and this year we also opening this training to private companies, so they can have like a team building with the bystander training. Another big thing in the ECAR plan is actually research. We often work together with universities, Brussels, Ghent, to investigate, for example, the professionalism of police checks in Ghent. There is an action framework that officers use to determine identity checks. because there is a perception that certain groups are targeted more than others for identity checks. I'm pretty sure that's recognizable for other cities too. And then the perception was, and it is, usually the officers, well, one of the conclusions of the research was that the officers mainly behave very professional, but that it's for youngsters often not clear why they are picked out for an identity check. And we have launched another project, Combi, its name, in which officers and youngsters engage together in sport activities, boxing. So they box together, they get to know each other, but most importantly, they get to know each other perspectives, which is very important to understand each other better. An obstacle is actually tied to the research results. For example, we also had field testing on discrimination in housing. And one pretty perverse effect is that real estate agents become very familiar with the anti-discrimination law and legislation. And therefore, they can use it to their advantage and kind of semi-legal discriminate in a way that it's very hard to prove nowadays if certain groups are still discriminated or not. I think I'll keep it by that. In total, an ACCR plan has like 32 actions that we try to monitor the effects of. So we're very happy to be part of the sites to improve our level, the quality of our data on this matter.
Thank you very much, Carmen. This is, of course, extremely interesting. Again, the practice you are proposing, because here you have demonstrate the different. First of all, we learned that the City of Ghent has an advisory board of human rights, which I think is important. And in addition to that, the City of Ghent is also a part of the City Coalition of Cities Against Racism and which combat structural discrimination. And this is interesting to see how at your city, at your level, you have translated that into really practice within the city community through notably the training to persons to understand whether they are victim of discrimination. And I really know the important number, 10,000 participants this year, now opening up to private company. I think this is a very inspiring process also to reach the community of private actor, but also to research together with different university in Belgium to investigate on professionalism check, to monitor certain group through police officer and youngsters to make identity check and bring the perspective of each other through being involved in boxing activities. Also very ludic and interesting. I like this empathy dimension. And last but not least, to this field testing on anti-discrimination in housing, which is, of course, not easy to demonstrate. So interesting to learn that you have a 32 action under this City Coalition Sitting Against Racism Action Plan. And of course, we are very much we are happy to welcome you in the DeCiDE project because, of course, you have this expertise and experience that would be very much valuable in the monitoring process. Thank you for sharing with us. Now, I will give the floor to Fanny Piborka Contro from Józsefváros. Józsefváros is a district from the municipality of Budapest. And Fanny, after a brief introduction, I would like to ask you, how does your district, your city, or your municipality promote active civic and political engagement beyond the election process, because you went through election not so long ago, and explain also to us in what ways are the residents empowered to participate in public life, such as, for example, participatory budgeting or neighborhood council or other inclusive democratic mechanism you would like to share reflecting the principle of the Article 12 and the Article 39 of the EU Charter of the Fundamental Rights? Fanny, the floor is yours.
Yes, Frederic, thank you so much for having me, and it's great to see you all. So I'm from the Office of Community Participation, so I will mostly talk about our work within the municipality. So first up, I think I will speak about the participatory budgeting, because of course we do have it on a city level. So we have one for Budapest, but our model is a little bit different. So we try to promote participation in all stages of the process. We have our own budget as well, which is of course smaller than the budget for Budapest. It's around €500,000. So in the first stage, everyone gets to submit their ideas. And then within the idea selection, we also try to involve everyone. So we have these, of course, first we have this filtering by expert groups. So they will tell which ideas can be put to practice and which can't. But then we have citizen groups who will decide which ideas will be voted on. And then everyone votes on the ideas, of course. This is open to everyone who lives in the 8th district of Budapest. And then we try to involve everyone in the implementation as well. So if an idea is not submitted, is submitted with name, we will try to involve that person in the implementation of the idea as well. And then we often involve NGOs and civil groups as well. And then on the other parts of your question, I'm sure you're all very familiar with this model of a policy cycle, and we do have our own version of that. So of course, in the first step is usually in this model is agenda setting. And I think something that is also very special in our district, that we have a separate unit whose role is to develop and support the advocacy skills of residents of municipal properties. So these will often be the most vulnerable groups who live in social housing or like municipal housing. And this unit provides trainings and forums to these people, and they will be very important in thematizing their needs for the next 5 years, and so that the policymakers can base their own political agendas on those needs. And we also have something that is very special, that we have our own version of participatory budgeting for children, and children's ideas will also help us kind of shape the policies going forward. So I think that's very unique. And we also have forums quite often where trade unions and NGOs can speak up. So we are also trying to promote this bottom-up approach through that. And they also have opportunities to speak on the monthly meetings of the body of representatives. And yes, so after the policymakers will kind of have these major strategies for these 5 years or 1 year, however big they are, they involve our office, and we will help them assess the needs of the people. So in this stage, we're asking ourselves, how can this policy or how can this planned urban development action respond to real needs of citizens? And we will choose a methodology which is at this stage is often quantitative. So we will go around knocking, we will ask everyone and do surveys, and then we will identify the priorities of these target groups. And then we make our own sort of document, and we give that back to policymakers. They will formulate a concept based on that. And then they involve us again for the second time, where we consult with either group of experts or the target group, which is the civil groups. And then at this stage, what we're asking is, how can we implement this policy? Are there any flaws in this concept? Which parts work, and what's the most efficient way to implement it? And then we will recommend the best course of action for the implementation. And then the policymakers formulate this final policy package, and then the adoption phase of this policy cycle is also, it's the body of representatives will vote on it on their monthly meeting. Before that, the technical committees will consult on the concept as well. Then we implement the policy, and the evaluation part is very important for DeCiDE, because this is actually what we want to learn from you, how to evaluate these policies well, how to have a good practice for this evaluation.
Thank you, Fanny.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for also underlining the important practice also you have at the level of UCT. Once again, in the context of what the city is doing at different level and through different cycle of the participatory budgeting, filtering first by group of experts, and then that citizen group, and then through the policy cycle to make sure that there is a gender setting, focusing on how to identify the priority and raise them at the political level through the agenda, but also involving children participation in the budgeting, so which leads to recommendation to 5 years project plan and development of action, reflecting, of course, the priority of the communities and the people living in the city based, and also recommendation. It's very interesting. Thank you, Fanny.
Thank you.
I would like now to pass the floor to Faka Attila, Program Manager of MIRA, which is an intercultural community, a community of space where migrants and refugees can learn the language, be part of events, and share their knowledge and skills with others. MIRA is providing information for newcomers and offers welcoming to warm community. So from your perspective, Fakas, what are the most pressing human rights issues in your community that often go unmonitored and unreported from a civil society perspective? Thank you for sticking to the 5 minutes, please.
Okay, I won't be long, I promise. Thank you for inviting me and having me. And so this question brings up a lot of topics for us, because if we are working with migrants in Hungary, I could say like very softly that Hungary is not the friendliest country for migrants. But I choose two for today, and both of them has to do with access. And one is access to asylum, and the second is access to information. And I would like to talk shortly about access to asylum, because this is like this has to do with some regulations in Hungary, which happened in 2020 when they changed the asylum seeking process in Hungary. So right now they cannot seek asylum at the borders, but they have to do to Kiev or Belgrade to apply for asylum seeking. And this is like a very, very complicated process, which resulted in last year only 29 asylum seeking. I don't have the word in English. So only 29 people applied for it, and only 5 of them received it. So in 365 days, only 5 people could gather asylum seeking status in Hungary, which I think is very, very sad. And I don't think this is right. So And after this, so it happened like 5 years ago, and as far as I know, the EU stated that this is against the EU law, so it has to be changed, but it's not changed yet, so it's still going on, and I think this whole process is kind of escalating since new and new regulations are coming up, which are making it more and more difficult for foreigners to come here and to be here and to live here in Hungary. And I think this is one of the most pressing human rights issue in our field. So the next one is access to information, which comes from a project we did 2 years before. It was a participation action research with migrants who live in Hungary, and in this project they diagnosed access to information as one of the most difficult thing for them. And the thing with this is that information is out there. Information is available in English, at least. Other languages not so much, but in English. But it's very hard to find. It's quite widespread on different platforms and different websites. So it is very hard to find the right answers for the questions that people are facing when they try to get by in Hungary. Luckily, the municipality, so our NGO works in Józsefváros. So with the municipality, we are doing one project that's looking at institutions in the district and checking how accessible they are language-wise. And we found that strangely, but like funnily, the cultural institutions are very, very accessible. Every information is accessible in English. They have printed materials in English. The website is translated and so on. But the problem is that police and the health institutions are very, very not accessible. Very few people speak English there. The website is not translated, and there are very few information accessible for people there. Okay, I'm now at 4 minutes, so this is my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Farkas. This was also very inspiring to have also from the experience and the practice from civil society organization, and you particularly working with migrant communities. So we understood that how complicated the process of asylum seeker is in Hungary. And over the past 5 years, this escalation in new regulation, which makes it very complicated for foreigners to live in Hungary, which is really attempt to basic human rights of the person, which is a big issue of concern. Thank you for highlighting that, but also highlighting from your perspective the research of the barrier for migrant living in Hungary in terms of access to information through language. And we understood that from cultural information, it's very accessible. A lot of information are translated in English, while in other sector like health, it's not. The website is not translated, and the language is very minimalistic. So it's very important to look at that in various sector. Thank you very much for highlighting these human rights shortcomings, I would say. So now I would like to pass the floor to the last speaker from Leijo. Peter Rossens is a youth worker and quality policy maker for Leijo. I hope I pronounce it well. You will correct me if not. Leijo focus on young people in vulnerable position to find their way in our increasingly more individualized society, and therefore encountering a greater difficulty. The organization engaged youngsters between the age of 12 and 25 in different fields by using the method of experiential learning. So we would like to hear from you, Peter. How can civil society help translate monitoring result into real change? And do you have example of this from your working experience with your organization? The floor is yours, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. This is relatively new for me, so I'll do my best to give a good presentation. From my perspective, or from the perspective of our organization, we find that policymakers often lose connection with the target group or with the people who live in real life. Often they look from their own perspective at problems and at solutions. And from that knowledge, we think it's important, and can civil society really play a role in gapping the bridge between active living people and policy makers. In that way that we can help translate the voices of the people, of the youngsters, into input and impact on through the policy makers. At Leo, we believe that monitoring is not only about numbers, but it's more about listening, about observing, about walking alongside those young people in vulnerable positions. And by doing that consistently and with care, we can serve a bridge between the needs of the target and the policymaking process. At Leo, we really believe in the concept of storytelling. It's not measuring and lists you can check, and on looking what are problems and what are solutions. But we really want to talk to the youngsters, really want to stand next to them and really work with the storytelling, because in the storytelling, we can really hear the real issues or the main issues they come across in their daily life. And when you put all those different stories together from those young people, you can actually analyze specific themes, specific aspects for them, where policymakers should change their actions. A good example from the storytelling or the narrative impact harvesting is the target group with young mothers who are still in education between the age of 15, 18, 19. We have a project financed by the city of Ghent who specializes in supporting those young mothers. And by talking to them over the years, we find that the educational system in Belgium does not provide the same rights as normal working mothers do. In Belgium, normal working mothers, they have I don't know, I think 3, maybe 5 months of maternity leave in order to take care of the child and to provide first care on those things. And by listening to the stories of the young mothers who are still going to school, we found out that in our educational system, they don't have the same rights. They only get 10 days of maternity leave, and then they had to go back to school, or they had to ask a doctor to write this prescription and stay home on prescription of the doctor. And hearing these stories, we started talking to policymakers on the city level, but also on governmental level. And by telling these stories again and again and again, we finally could change the policy. And now young mothers who are in an educational system get the same rights as normal mothers in working condition. And it's really about hearing the stories and analyzing the issues at hand that provided us with that intel to change a policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Also to reporting also what in the city of Ghent, how you translate the voice of the youngster into policy, true policy maker into policy for the city. Very interesting. And the monitoring, how you work through storytelling and also working at more listening and observing the vulnerable young group, which are in a difficult position rather than focusing on number and highlighting the importance of the concept of storytelling, but also you give this very interesting example of the difference of rights in terms of education for young mother not working and those one working, and through this narrative that you've been able to influence policymaker and change the situation. Thank you very much, Peter. This is also a very inspiring, concrete example report from civil society organization from the city of Ghent. So now, given the time, if you allow me, I will open the floor to the question. And I've already have here two questions which has been kindly reported to me by Pietro. So the first one is addressed to Fanny Birboca Contro. In what way is equality data about the state of equality and discrimination used for policy evaluation, and are the target group a part of the evaluation process usually? If you can respond to that quickly. And then, yes, you can start with this, and then I will have two more little points right after.
Yeah, so on the first question, actually, my colleague is in the meeting as well, and she's leading the Equal Opportunities Office, so she would be the most qualified to answer that question. But I do know that they work together with research institutes and NGOs as well. They work together with Attila, who is right there. So I know for big data, they're not using our little office, but more like bigger research institutes. And for the evaluation, yes, this is something that I think we don't really have one practice that we use all the time. So this is something that we hope to gain from DeCiDE. But yes, so I think they probably use some research institutes as well for that, but we do need a better practice.
Thank you very much. Leah, do you have any other question to report or to share with us that you've been spotted in the chat? Otherwise, if it's not the case, I would like, in order to close the session, I think one question which has been raised is what motivates City to be part of the DeCiDE project? So I think it would be a very nice way to have a closure. So each of the 5 speakers can say in a nutshell what is the motivation of the city from the city municipality perspective, or the civil society organization, what motivates them to take part to this DeCiDE project on monitoring. Thank you. So one by one, we take the same order, no, of Padova, Ghent, and then civil society, same order. Francesca?
She's left.
Okay, so we can go to Carmen.
Yes.
Thank you. What
Yeah,
motivates you in one sentence?
Yeah, one sentence is increasingly we have to bewijzen, to prove the impact of actions that we do that cost money, and we want to monitor the effects for political reasons, but also to see if what we aim to do with a project is effectively what we do. That's it.
Thank you, Carmen. Next. Next is Farkas. No, Fanny.
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, Fanny first and then Farkas, sorry.
Yeah, so I think for us, we Historically, I think we are one of the poorest districts of Budapest, of course. So I think we are usually very happy if we can develop anything, if we can better people's lives, but we don't really have a very good practice on how to check back, how to see if our policies are working the most efficiently. And I think maybe we have gotten to a point when we can actually focus on learning from other cities and focus on this part of the policy cycle as well.
Thank you for that, Fanny. And I think at this stage we can also maybe you're the poorest district of Budapest, but you are the most active in terms of human rights through a lot of activities, anti-discrimination. So I would like to acknowledge that and underline that. Thank you very much. Next, Farkas.
Yeah, I think for us as a CSO, we are quite experienced in doing, and we are quite experienced in action, but in evaluation and monitoring, we are not that very experienced. So it would be a good chance to grow in this field.
Thank you very much. And from your side, Peter?
Well, what Farkas says is also for our organization transferable. For me, for our organization, the main reason to participate is also to translate those big human rights themes into practical indicators that can help us to harvest the right stories in order to measure impact and really make a change on policy makers.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. I think it was extremely inspiring webinar because through also your last word on how, despite I would say that despite the very interesting local practice at local level, it's also showed the interest and the interest from the cities, but also the municipalities, is this cross-fertilizing, this exchange of doing better, responding to better policies, taking into account communities' needs and translate them into the policy and make it better, improving, and from the civil society also to same from the other side to translate human rights into really concrete change for the communities, but also to grow in the field, having this experience. And of course, the overall purpose of the project is to create a space where civil society and municipality can work together, discuss human rights. What does it mean? Does it respond to the needs of the communities and having better policies for the well-being of living in cities from the human rights-based approach, but the human rights perspective? So thank you very much to all the speakers to illustrate how important the DeCiDE project is, that is responding really to a need that comes from the civil society, but the municipalities, and having this experience and this possibility to have exchange from different cities and having a kind of a peer exchange, which is very fruitful and which is of extremely good value for us. So thank you for the participant of today. Thank you to all of the speakers for the inspiring experience and practice you gave us today. It was a pleasure, and it's a real honor for the Human Rights City and the Global Parliament of Mayors to work with all of you. Thank you and good afternoon to everyone.